our obligation is to make sure that the younger generation know what happened back then and learn from that and say, this is how your grandpa and grandma and your great grandpa and great grandma, this is their life. This is what they had to go through.
Okay, so Dan, before we even get started with this, the thing that I wanted to bring up was I think the only time one of, if not the only time we've ever worked together was on your movie. Um, and I played your son, and we had this
Yep.
scene where we're in your
Yeah.
dining room and having
Yeah.
dinner together. And it was only like a brief moment, but
Uh-huh.
ever since then, every time I see you, I have this weird feeling like, "Hey, Dad!" Oh, there's something like that. It's such an interesting thing that small little experience. I feel like there's a
Yeah.
connection here. So when I
Yeah.
see you on here, it's almost like, "Hey, good to see you, pops."
Yeah, every once in a while when I look at that, that was parts of the same circle. Yeah, so that was a fun scene to do. I mean, it was well, of course, there was a bunch of really good actors in that scene, and so it was a fun scene to do.
Before we started recording, you had mentioned your son. So I was going to ask you, do you have any actual like biological children and not just fake ones like me? So you have a son, and do you have any other
Yes,
kids?
I have a son and a daughter. Both of
Oh.
them live in California, so we see them infrequently,
Hmm.
not as frequently as we would like, obviously. Typically, we fly over for Christmas um, or whatever times that we can
Right.
take. Most of it driven by their schedule more than our schedule, because most of them, my wife and I are both retired, so we're pretty flexible on time. But my
Hmm.
son and my daughter both still work, so we have to kind of work around their schedule as well. Yeah.
I've always wondered what that's like because, for me, I only went away for, I don't know, a couple of years for
Hmm.
college and then
Hmm.
came back home. My mom has since moved to the mainland, but it's pretty common nowadays for a lot of people to stay here in Hawaii and then their kids move on to the mainland for college and they actually just, create a life and a career up there.
Yeah.
For you as a parent, how has that experience been of having your children live, as we've heard on the continental
On the
US.
continent. Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, it's not as enjoyable. I mean,
Hmm.
both of them are up there. My son has two kids, so we have two grandkids.
Oh,
So everybody's up there on the mainland. Yeah. So special days, holidays, whatever, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas. Well, Christmas we're typically up there, but Thanksgiving,
hmm,
Super Bowl, those
yeah.
kinds of events. Pretty quiet around here, yeah, because there's only the two of us, my wife and
Hmm.
myself. So that part is kind of tough, not to have family around. Um, but other than that, I mean, we talk pretty much daily
Hmm.
on the phone,
Wow,
so we,
that's
we
great.
keep up with what's going on. My granddaughter just started college.
Oh,
Hard,
wow.
yeah, I know. It's like, what?
Congratulations.
Really? She's not that old.
Yeah, I was imagining a little girl.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Wow.
in our mind, she is always the little
Yeah.
girl, right? Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. But
yeah.
yeah, she just started college this year, so new adventure.
Hmm.
But also taking her away time wise,
Yeah.
so sometimes that even when we're there visiting, she's not around. Yeah, she's
Hmm.
either in school or hanging out with her friends.
Yeah.
So it's been challenging, but it's their life, and so as long
Yeah.
as we can keep connected either through phone calls or FaceTime or whatever we
Hmm.
can put together, it's still we can still keep connected. Yeah.
When you were raising your kids, as kids,
Yeah.
did you ever imagine or try to prepare yourself like there's going to be a possibility that they're going to live, far away, or was this kind of a surprise to you where you're like, oh
Sure.
man.
Yeah, I don't think we think about it. At least I don't think I did.
Mm,
It's just you just go day to day, and so they're
yeah.
there all the time.
Hmm.
Yes, sure, they're going to move out of the house, and they may get their own apartment someplace else. So
Right.
they won't be at home. But no, I don't think I actually thought that they would be 4,000 miles away,
Yeah.
5,000 miles away. So it's yeah, never really crossed our minds on that. And then of course now that they're away, question always becomes, are they coming back? You know,
And the
um,
question's never been, should we go up there?
Should we? Well, no, that has entered into the picture, and we're not at that point yet.
Mm,
But yeah, and we have a friend or two that has done that, pulled up their stakes here and then moved to the mainland because that's where
yeah.
their kids are. Um, and they're all retired too. So just like us, I suppose once you're retired, there's not much here. But for me, there's after I retired, there's a whole well, actually before I retired, but after I retired, there's a whole new life here, right? With my acting and my storytelling. So that circle of folks that I hang out with are here. And
Yeah.
if I moved to the mainland, I would not have that circle. I could probably start another circle there, but um, so we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But the discussion has come up. The thought about, hey, so everybody's up there, we're here, so
Mhm.
maybe we should move up there, kind of thing. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about, your life after retirement. And
Mm-hmm.
I've always been curious because I think most people, we have this tendency to always look ahead and be like, oh, that would be better than where I'm at now and such. So
Yeah.
from a person who's in, the career now, and you think, oh, when I retire, when I get to that age, I'm just gonna go sit at McDonald's and drink coffee with my friends, and it's gonna be so great. But then I think, well, what else am I going to do and stuff? So I
Yeah.
was curious from your perspective of living this life, like how has it been? And do you still have those kind of, I guess, stresses in life that you did when you were in your career? Or is it like what we, imagine, like, oh, carefree life is perfect kind of thing?
I haven't graduated to the point where I'm hanging out at McDonald's yet.
Okay. I'm sure your
um,
cholesterol levels happy about that.
yeah, well, it's not that I don't enjoy the food there. I just,
Yeah.
haven't gotten into that mode. I was always busy from before when I was working. And, I kind of sat down one time. I was thinking, boy, I was kind of nuts, kind of crazy. Maybe kind of like what you're doing. When you
What
got
age are you talking
well,
about?
well, probably in my late 20s, early 30s,
Okay.
into 40s.
Yeah.
So while I was still working.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm trying to make a long story short here. So I had other interests. Obviously, I've always been interested in performance arts. Doing things like that. I just never really had the opportunity or time in my early life or career to do
Hmm.
that. So later on, when I had a little bit more time, I started doing that. So I took a Columbia School of Broadcasting
Oh,
course.
wow. I remember
Uh,
those commercials all the time on
yes,
TV.
and I heard all those commercials, and so I
Yeah.
signed up. Part of the training is that once you get towards the end of your training, they actually put you in a real radio station to
Mm,
work, just to get experience.
yeah.
And so I was assigned to a radio station, which at that time was KORL, Coral,
Hmm.
AM station, and they played basically big band music. So Glenn Miller and Tommy Dorsey and all those kinds of songs.
Yeah.
I was there with Cam Fong Chun, as a matter of fact. Cam
Oh,
Fong
cool.
was,
Yeah.
from the old original 5-0. One of my fellow DJs was an actor, basically in commercials. And so we were talking story one day, and he says, "Hey, you interested in in acting?" And I said, "Oh, I've always been interested in acting." He says, "Hey, why don't you sign up with my agent, and we can get you some work?" And I go, "Cool, let's do that."
Wow.
So I did, and so I got sent out on a few auditions to do commercials, and then from then it went to episodic TV shows, and then to plays, and so I slowly started getting into the performance area, basically out of the radio. Yeah,
Yeah.
starting there. Um, so at one point I was working, and I continued. After choral, I moved to Kumu KUMU FM.
Hmm.
Um, at that point, they were playing elevator music, what they called
Yeah.
elevator music. Um, and so I was working my regular job Monday
And
through
what was
Friday.
that?
I was on active duty with the Army at AAA,
Oh, really?
hmm at
Wow.
the medical center there.
Wow.
So Monday through Friday, I was there, and then on Saturdays and Sundays, I worked at the radio station at Kumu. So I was working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
right? And then whatever acting gigs came along, whether it be episodic TV or plays or whatever, that was on
Hmm.
top of that. Plus, of course, my real life with my family and my kids and all that. So I had like
Yeah.
four balls that I was kind of juggling. And so later on, I sat down and thought about it. I'm going, wow, that was kind of nuts, really, when you think about it. I'm working
Yeah.
7 days a week. Plus, on top of that, if I have to do plays and if I have to, show up for auditions or actually film a TV show
Right.
or film a movie or whatever, on top of everything else that I was doing. So retirement for me was actually a relief because I
Hmm.
got to give up the Monday through Friday gig, but I still had the time to do all these other things. So it kind of worked out for me. Maybe I suppose I had something to fall back on once
Hmm.
I retired. A lot of folks, work was it for them,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
when they retire, they really have nothing because they hadn't thought about, well, what am I going to do once I don't have to, show up at work?
Right.
And then so now they start searching for stuff, golf or tennis or pickleball, I guess is the big
Hmm.
thing now. Or hanging out at McDonald's, whatever. I mean, I
Right.
got to find something to do with my time. That was never a dilemma for me. I always said, in fact, if anything, I had less time. When I bumped into a friend of mine after I retired, says, "So, all this free time now that you're retired," he goes, I, I don't know where the free time is. I mean, my days are still filled with stuff I got to do, and and plus you have to add to that, whatever doctor's appointments or
Hmm.
take your car in for servicing and all this kind of stuff. That's still going on. So no, if anything, I seem to be more busy now than I
Hmm.
was when I was actually working. And maybe that was because you had to balance that anyway, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
we have to work, so we have to figure out how I'm going to do that. And so now that I don't have to work, I can fill all the spaces with whatever I want. And so it becomes, after some days, I mean, some days we got like four things going on. You go to one thing, then you got to go to another thing, then you got to go to another. It's like, not you're not just sitting down and sipping your coffee and eating your donut kind of thing, although that would be nice too.
But you're saying that you got to fill your life after retirement with things that you wanted. So, it, can you feel the difference between, I guess, the satisfaction and joy of what you're doing now versus when you're trying to juggle when you said I had to work?
Yeah.
Or has this stuff that you've chosen kind of taken the place of work where it has that kind of feeling still of, hey, this isn't fun. I still feel like this is an obligation or
Yes.
a commitment.
Well, that's a good word.
Mhm.
Obligation, commitment. Yeah. And it's not like I didn't enjoy work. I did.
Mhm.
So all of it was, stuff I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now that I'm on my own time essentially, and I can say no, we can't say no to work basically. Hey, you got
Right,
to come
right.
in. I don't feel like working today. Kind of, we can't do that, right? But
Yeah.
with the things that I'm doing now, yeah, I think the word obligation and commitment kicks in
Mhm.
because I said to Nolan, I'm going to do this thing, and so I'm committed. I've got that obligation to do
Mhm.
that, and so I can't just blow it off and say, hey, Nolan, I got this. I got to go meet some friends at McDonald's, so I can't. I can't do your thing.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I can do that because I already said okay to you. And
Mhm.
so, I've got that obligation and commitment. So, yeah, I think there's still a little bit of, I don't want to use the word pressure because it's not pressure, it's stuff I like to do. But, there's
Mhm.
still that I have to be careful about what I say yes to
Mhm.
because once I say yes, I'm locked in there. And so, I've got to kind of balance everything out as much as I can,
Yeah.
or try to.
So what drives you to make the decisions of what you do, put your energy and time towards? Because before the job, while you enjoyed it, it
Yeah.
provided you, money
Yeah.
to support your family. But now that you don't need that, I assume, what is it that drives you to say yes to the things that you are doing?
Uh, yeah, I think now what it boils down to is what I want to do, what sound if somebody calls me up and says, hey, I'd like you to work with me on this project or thing or whatever. If it's something that I want to do, then I'll try to find space in my schedule to do it.
Hmm.
What do I say no to? I say no to stuff that I don't feel I can give a fair commitment of time. And that is based on looking at my calendar, right? So if I've
Hmm.
already said yes to, say, two or three different things, and I know it's going to take some time to do those things, that I don't want to say yes to the next thing because I look at my calendar and I'm going, I'm just not going to have enough time to do that. And so I'm going to feel like I'm not pulling my load, pulling my
Hmm.
share of the load. And so in that case, I would probably say no. Said I'd love to do it, but I just got too many things going on right now, and I just don't feel like I can give it 100%, the concentration that I think you deserve for that. And so no, I can't do that. Maybe next time if there's
Yeah.
more, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I do now, what I do now in terms of trying to juggle all those balls, trying to be fair to everybody and trying to be fair to myself too, because after a while you realize you can only do so much. I mean, physically and emotionally, you can only do so much. And so after a
Yeah.
while, it's like, well, now, when I look at my calendar and I got 4, 5, 6 different things going on the same day, it's like, oh, this is nuts. So yeah, so after a while, you kind of realize that you can't do everything.
Must be nice to be so wanted. Just kidding. Yeah.
Nah, I don't know if it's so much wanted. It's especially if we're talking about acting roles. I mean, the problem and the good thing, I suppose, that I have at this point in my life is that there aren't a lot of roles for older actors. A lot of the plays and a lot of the movies that are being made are being made. They make these things to reach out to the demographic that they want to come see it, right?
Right.
And so a lot of the plays and movies that are currently being made are made for the 20 somethings and 30 somethings. And so the actors and performers in those projects are that same age, right?
Hmm.
And so there aren't a lot of roles for older actors. So I don't get a lot of calls as much as I would like, maybe. Um, the other side of that is that whenever we do have a call for an older actor, I'm one of those few people around, so they call me,
Yeah.
and so it's like okay, so that's when you just have to start looking at your schedule and juggling those balls and saying,
Right.
I always talk to a friend of mine who's also a performer, and said, doesn't that seem like it's feast or famine? Really? I mean, we'll
Hmm.
go for chunks of time. I mean, chunks of time, 6 months where nothing is happening. There's no plays, there's no movies, there's nothing going on. And it's just nothing, dead. And
Hmm.
all of a sudden, bang, you get
Yeah.
4 calls in a row. It's like, I want you for this, I want you for this. Yeah, it's like, oh, wow, where were you guys 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a scheduling thing. But yeah, it just seems like it's feast or famine. Either we're working really, really hard trying to juggle all the balls, or we're just sitting down, not doing anything,
Yeah.
which is good. Sitting down, not doing anything is not bad. I've kind of started enjoying streaming shows on the television, and that's kind of not a good thing either because that's kind of addictive. Once you start into an episodic thing and
Yeah.
there's like 7 episodes,
And
you
it's
watch number
available for
one
you.
and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I got to see what happens in number two.
Hmm.
Oh, I got to see what happens in number three. Oh, I got to see how this ends.
We're almost there. I'll just finish it
We're
off.
almost there. Yeah, just 16 hours worth. That's
Yeah.
all right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So after a while, yeah, it is kind of addictive. And so that's not a good thing either. But yeah, so there are days when there's nothing going on. You can just sit down and say, okay, what's on? And you click on the TV and you sit there and watch something. From a performer standpoint, that I find is a good thing too,
Hmm.
because then we get to see what I, in my opinion, are good performances from really really good performers, and so we can take notes. We can always learn, right? So I'm watching and I'm going, wow, that's really cool. I mean, he did a really good job with that, or she did a really good job with that, you know. So you try to take away something from that, and hopefully, you know, store it in here, and maybe you can pull it up later when you have to play a similar role, you know. Somebody asked me that one time, so how do you decide how a character is going to be? And I said, well, some of it is based on what the writer intended,
Hmm.
because if you read the, you know, the script, it's there really. And then some of it is going to depend on what the director wants, in terms of pulling it out of you, and some of it is you. You have to kind of figure it out. And so, a long time ago, I took an acting class, and I started doing this card file thing. You know, the teacher basically says, so you keep a card file up here, you know, little 3 by 5 note cards, and you know, you remember things, you know, how you felt when your dog died, how you felt when, you know, you stepped on that nail, you know, how you felt when, you know, that kind of stuff. And you can try to file away all these feelings or thoughts, and then so later on when you have to play a role, where that kind of pain or angst or whatever is
Hmm.
necessary, then you just go to your file cabinet and you pull up the appropriate card and you go, oh, okay, this is a good feeling. Let me see if I can use that to create this particular character. So sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But
That's really interesting because when you're saying that, I was wondering, could you apply that same thing to real life in the sense
real
of,
life.
because of all of these characters and stories that you've been a part of, you've kind of gotten to live multiple lives and been able to
Hmm.
have these
Hmm.
experiences through
Yeah.
other people's writing, so that when you're dealing with something in real life or a person or a situation, do you feel like you've gotten to kind of see it from multiple angles so that you can be more empathetic or be more understanding with the person?
I try. So yeah, you know, life does, or life is what happens, and what you're trying to perform is really based on life. I suppose that would be the more true and realistic, version of that particular character. So yeah, um, I try to take some of those things that I've learned and apply it to my life. It's not always easy, you know. We do
Yeah.
have our core personality. We have our core, you know, behavior pattern that we've developed over the years, and so it's hard to overcome that, especially some things that maybe you're not that happy with,
Hmm.
in terms of what you're doing. So, oh man, I shouldn't have said that, or oh, I shouldn't have done that, kind of thing. You know.
And you can't go,
Um,
let's do another take of
yeah, yeah,
that. Let's
cut.
roll it back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's do that again. Yeah, take two, take two. Okay.
Yeah.
What I really meant to say was, yeah, yeah, we don't have that opportunity, obviously. So you have to kind of try to, you know, do it right the first time. And yeah, so sometimes, you know, as you said, I've had the opportunity to be different people, which is kind of a treat that most people don't have in real life, right? You get to be
Hmm.
you, and that's it. But you know, but there are different versions of you. You know, there are different versions of
Yeah.
us, and so there are some versions that we don't really like, and there are some versions that we like, and so you try to kind of maybe steer yourself towards the version of yourself that you like. um, but I suppose, and I'm not a psychologist, but I suppose that the negative aspect of that is then you're not being real.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
guess is the word, right? I mean, then I'm
Hmm.
being fake in the sense that I'm trying to be something here when I'm
Yeah.
really here. Yeah, I mean, my true reaction would be this, but
Hmm.
I know that's not acceptable, so I'm going to shift over here and I'm going to react this way. But then that's not being honest. Yeah,
Yeah. That
that's
being
not
your
being
authentic.
real.
Right. Yeah.
Being authentic. Yeah, I mean, maybe politically correct in that
Hmm.
environment, and maybe there are times when we have to do that. You
Yeah.
know, okay, I have to say something here because it's appropriate. I don't really feel it, but I have to do it because that's what's appropriate here, right? And so we tend to do that, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right?
Right.
I mean, if I said what I was really thinking, it would not be a good thing. So yeah, so
And you mentioning about authenticity and
hmm,
such, do you feel like, because a lot of people will say to me like, oh, but you're an actor, so it's
yeah,
easy for you and such, but
yeah.
um, have you felt that because of this acting background that it was at any point hard for you to determine, is this my authentic self? Like, who am I versus is this just, me performing as what I think others would want me to show up as in real life, not on stage, of course. But was there ever that kind of difficulty of you trying to determine, well, which is the real true me? Or did you always have that strong sense and know how to, you know, decipher between the two?
I would say that my normal comfort zone is, I think I'm more introverted
Interesting.
than extroverted. So my comfort zone would be, for example, let's say I go to a gathering of people, a party,
Hmm.
let's say, and
Yeah.
I walk into the room. My comfort zone is really to grab a drink, grab a plate of food, and sit down in the corner and eat and drink.
Mm.
Whether I talk to anybody or whether I get into some deep conversation, it is outside of that comfort zone. I kind of feel a little uncomfortable doing that. I'll do it.
Mhm.
Obviously, if somebody comes up to me and starts
Right.
talking, I'll be polite and I'll have that conversation. But I'm not that person who goes to a party and immediately shakes hands and starts saying hello and hi, how are you, kind of thing,
Yeah.
immediately before getting my drink and my food and sitting down in the corner. You see, I would do that first. I mean, I'd say hello to the host and all
Right,
this
right.
kind of stuff, but um, I'm not the life of the party, so to
Yeah.
speak. Now most
You
people
wouldn't
might
seek
say,
out the attention. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think most people would say, as you say, oh, you're an actor, man. You can
Hmm.
just do whatever. You're just out there. And I go, well, see, but that's me as the actor.
Hmm.
That's the character I'm playing. That's the persona I'm putting on when I'm on stage or when I'm in the movie or whatever. Um, but that's not me. Me is the guy who's sitting there, drinking his drink and eating his food and not saying anything. That's my comfort zone. So even public speaking, I mean, I do it. People will
Uh-huh.
call me up to MC things or give a talk or whatever, um, and I'll do it. But that's not my comfort zone. That's outside of my comfort zone. Um, um, and so when I'm on stage, when I'm in front of the microphone, then obviously I can do that because I'm comfortable doing that. Um, but that's not me, right?
Yeah.
That's the person I've created that can stand up there on stage in front of the microphone and do this thing.
Well, I guess the way that would describe you, which I feel like we're very similar, is you're an extroverted introvert. Right? Like,
Okay, I'll
yeah,
go
like
with that. I'll go with that.
your nature is introvert, but you can be extroverted
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
that's
The
um
other, your question also brings up this thought that sometimes I feel like, well, this is a deep psychology. I should get a psychoanalyst, I guess. Like a fake. Does that make sense?
yes, that is something
That
that I struggle with too. So it's
yeah.
interesting that someone as accomplished and
Well, see, that's the part. See,
yeah,
like people looking at me saying, "Well, you're so accomplished, you're
right.
so good, you're so skilled at these," but then I feel like, yeah, but I feel like I'm faking this whole thing. I mean, like
So
I'm
why do you
not.
feel
I'm
that?
not. Well, I do what I can do for a particular role or whatever I'm doing, MC even, because
Hmm.
that's a kind of persona we put on. Um, but then you get to the, is this really me? Is this a true manifestation of myself?
Hmm.
And then so then I start going, no, I'm not really. I kind of feel like I'm fake in the sense that I've
Hmm.
created this persona that's really not me. It's like that introverted extrovert kind of thing. Or
Yeah.
extrovert introvert, um, and that's really me. And so all this other stuff is not me. And
Hmm.
so when somebody says, "Oh yeah, but you're so you can do anything," and I go, no, Yes, thank you. You're stroking my ego, and I feel really good when you say that. But yeah, and then you sit down in quiet moments when you're by yourself, and you go, "Wow, that's such a big fake." Yeah, I can do these things, but that's not really me. And I haven't done a lot of reading. I have a friend who does a lot of reading of biographies and things like that, and particularly of performers, actors. And I don't do enough of that, maybe, but maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, but I'm thinking that a lot of actors that we feel are really good at what they
Mhm.
do are kind of the same way. They're kind of introverted, and they're kind of quiet, and
Mhm.
in their real life they're kind of closed in to themselves, kind of thing, and they would prefer to sit at home rather than being out there at the nightclubs and doing all this social stuff. um, and so that when they get on stage or on screen, that they're actually performing and they're doing something that they're good at, but not necessarily them. In terms of internally, that's not them. Yeah, they're playing that
Yeah.
particular character. Yeah.
For you, why do you do it then? Because I can imagine someone who has never acted or performed, they
Mm,
look at you and they go, "You've been on stage and in front of
yeah.
cameras all your life, and you're telling me now that you're an introvert." Like,
Yeah.
what would have caused you to want to take this person who loved to be at home by himself and go and stand in front of hundreds of people and be in front of
Yeah.
thousands of people
Yeah.
across the world? What what makes that, switch happen?
We hit on it a little bit earlier that you get to be somebody else
Hmm.
for a little while, right? I get to um, play a character that is not me. And I get to do it for a period of time, whether it's for the run of the play or for that particular scene in the movie or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that part I find enjoyable, because it's like, would I do that as me? No. There are times when I'm playing a role where I say, no, I would never say that, and I would never do that.
Hmm.
So that's not me. But for that particular project, I can be that person, right? And so I think that part of it is the draw. It's the tempting part of it, to say you can pretend you're somebody else for a little while, somebody that you wouldn't normally be. And so I think that part of it is the part that I say yes to, and I say, oh yeah, I'd love to do that, because I know that I wouldn't do that in real life, or I wouldn't be that way in real life. And so, but I get to pretend for a little while that I am like that. Yeah.
What is so appealing to you to be able to do it? Because some people would say, no, I don't want that life. Like, there's a reason why I'm like this. Like, why would
Uh,
I want to do it?
yeah.
I know for me, like, especially when I'm in a dream, and I know, at some point you realize, oh, I'm dreaming. This isn't real life. Then I have this desire to, like, I'm going to do whatever I feel like because there's no repercussions. Like, I can jump off
Sure.
this cliff and
Yeah.
I'll wake up and I'll be
Yeah.
alive. So
Yeah.
I know for that, it's like this kind of feeling of like, I've always been curious. So that's why I think maybe that is my draw towards it. But for you,
Yeah.
what is your attraction to this chance to be somebody else or try to approach things in a way that you as Dan, the human,
Mm,
wouldn't,
yeah.
person wouldn't do that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly what you said. I think you answered that. I mean, I get to do something that I know. Well, I shouldn't say it's not real, because then it would come across that way. I mean, it is real in terms of the character I'm trying to create. I mean, it's not like when you just said that about jumping off the cliff. My mental picture was Wile E. Coyote. Yeah, when
Okay.
he when he chases the roadrunner off the cliff, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden he's standing there off the cliff, and he realizes, uh oh, and then
Yeah.
kind of thing. But he lives for another day, right? So
Yeah.
as an actor, we can jump off the cliff, I can fall down, and yet I will survive, and I will, come back for another day, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's the answer. I think I get to pretend. I get to do things that I would not normally do, and still survive that. I
Hmm.
can play that, nasty old man, which I hope I'm not. But this is kind of a side story, and you can edit this out. But I was at a conference one time, and I was checking out of the hotel on the day after the conference ended. And of course, like most conferences, there's a whole line of people all waiting to check out. So I'm in this line. There's maybe about 6, 7 people in front of me. So this guy that's behind me all of a sudden just rushes up to the front counter. He pounds on the counter and he's yelling at the desk clerk and he says, I've got a plane to catch. I have no time for this BS. You need to check me out now.
Hmm.
I mean, he was really loud. He was really nasty.
Yeah.
And so the desk clerk very calmly says, Sir, there are 6 people in line ahead of you. I will get to you when I get to you, but please just get to the back of the line and I will take care of you. Just like that. Very
Mhm.
calm, very even. So the guy walks back behind me in line. And I turn to him and I look at him like, I was just about to say, well, that was, and he looks at me, he goes, well, sometimes it works. So I looked at him. I said, "You mean you just faked that whole thing?" He says, "Yeah, sometimes it works." I go, "Wow!" So as the actor in me, I'm thinking, "Okay, I got
Yeah.
to remember that. Yeah, I got to remember that but so here was this guy who, in real life, puts on this persona,
Hmm.
figuring that he's going to get his way
Yeah.
because of that. But in this case, he didn't get his way. But he basically said, "Well, I tried," you know. And he was a nice guy. We ended up having a nice conversation back there at the back of the
That's
line. But
fascinating.
it was like, yeah, fascinating. It's like, wow, he created this whole persona just to get what he wanted. And this is real life, right? And this isn't
Yeah.
acting on stage. He just did it. And I said, wow, maybe I can do that.
Yeah.
I can be that crotchety old man at the store or something, but I've never done that yet in real life.
You not only have experience in performing, but in writing, in the creation. And here in Hawaii, it seems like performance, whether it's theater, film, and such, like it seems to be a really important art for us as a community. And I could be wrong in this perception, but it seems like the majority of the work that is created out of Hawaii tends to skew more heavily towards drama,
Hmm.
and heavy subjects
Hmm.
versus uh,
Comedy.
comedy
Yeah.
or love story,
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
In your opinion, why do you feel like, because when you think Hawaii, you think like, aloha, like
Yeah.
positive, bright,
Yeah.
sunshine, and the
Yeah.
people are all happy. But yet when we create artwork here, representing, our stories, it seems to skew heavy on the darker, more serious stuff. Do
Yeah.
you have an opinion on why that is?
Not a real meaningful opinion, but I know that as a performer, comedy is really tough. It's much harder than drama.
Mhm.
In comedy, it's a matter of timing. It's a matter of emphasis. That pregnant pause in a comedic response is all important, and it takes a lot of effort to do that sometimes. Whereas, and it counts in drama too, but I think comedy is a lot harder to do than drama. I think that's why we have a lot of, or we don't have as many comedic kind of plays or movies for that reason. I think it's really tough to carry out a whole movie that's a comedy as an actor. And even as a writer too, I would think I don't consider myself a writer. I mean, I have some ideas, but I
Mhm.
don't think I can write a whole screenplay or a whole play, for example. But I think comedy is harder to do than drama, and I think in recent times we've maybe skewed a little bit too far on the drama side. Um,
Yeah.
in an effort, I think, to show real life, which has a place, and we need to do that. If we're looking at the really ugly underbelly of society when it comes to drugs and crime and just real life situations,
Mhm.
um, it's maybe I wouldn't say it's easier to write that, but it's kind of based on fact, and so from that
Right.
standpoint, it's easier to write because it really happens. Yeah, and so I think we're skewing in that direction. Maybe one because it's easier to come up with those stories, and two because it really happens.
Hmm.
And so we're showing the ugly side of life, even in Hawaii, which is easier to do than to show the light, happy side of Hawaii,
Yeah.
because that's tougher, I think, to come up with a whole production that's all light and airy and funny and things like that. I think that's more challenging. Not to say it shouldn't be done, but I think
Hmm.
that's to me why there are less of those shows around, because it's harder to do. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
harder to put together a story like that.
It seems like in the way you describe it and what I've seen, it's the stories that are told are more to um, almost like just educate people like this is an aspect of life here, this is
Right.
experience. I haven't necessarily seen much of something where the intention is to maybe inspire to, do something or feel a different way. And I'm almost wondering if that's part of, the local culture of like, who am I to tell you what to do? Or, like that kind of that humility kind of thing. What do you think?
Well, yeah. Well, on the in the when I've been doing plays since the late '80s now, and in the beginning, most of the plays that I did uh, were light and airy. They were
Mm,
the Ed Sakamoto plays, basically. Where he writes about life back in the day.
yeah.
Um, and his memories of growing up in Hawaii, because he relocated to Los Angeles when he was right after college, and he's stayed there uh, and never came home, basically.
Mm,
But his memories of home was always in his plays, and so most of his plays are kind of light and airy. Not to say there weren't heavy moments in them, but basically, there most of the scenes were kind of light and airy and
mhm.
showing the happy times of life in Hawaii, kind of thing. Um, and I'm not sure when it shifted, but I think in more recent years, I haven't done a lot of those
Yeah.
kinds of plays recently.
Mhm.
Most of the plays tend to be heavier in terms of the material that they're dealing with. I, and that's not to say that life in Hawaii now is all heavy. I mean, there are
Right.
we do have heavy things, but we also have light and happy times as well. So I'm not sure why the playwrights aren't writing those kinds of things, the happy stuff, that
Mhm.
certainly exists out there. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe that's a challenge to the playwrights, the younger playwrights, and maybe that's a function of the age of the writers. Most of the playwrights now are younger, and so they write things that they're
Mm.
knowledgeable about.
Mhm.
And maybe that part of society is not as light and airy
Yeah.
as it used to be back in the. I think I mean, not to say that things are worse now, but I think in the '50s and '60s and even '70s and '80s, um, life in Hawaii was probably a little bit more, uh, uh, you know, um, laid back, and I don't know what the word is. I'm trying to think about. Not saying it was a happy time, but I think it was more laid back and kind of more loose, kind of
Mm.
hang loose kind of thing, and
Yeah.
so I think that relationships and family situations and things were kind of like that, and they're still there. But I think what's happened over the more recent years is that a lot of the negative things in society has kind of overrun
Mm.
the happy stuff. There's some happy stuff still going on,
Yeah.
but we still have to deal with drugs and crime, and there's it. Life is tougher now, I think, for the young folks coming up than it was
Mhm.
for me when I was growing up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say it was easy for me when I was growing up, but I think life was simpler back then in the 50s and 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
than it is now. And I think now it's a lot more complicated. Now there's a lot more uh, heavy stuff that a lot of the young folks have to deal with, and so I think the writing tends to skew in that direction because that's what they're used to. That's what they're growing up with now. Just like in the 50s and 60s, what I grew up with, would be
Hmm.
something that I would write about, which would not be dealing with, the drugs and crime and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Um, so maybe we're just a product of the times we're in.
Yeah. No, I'm glad and really appreciate that perspective because it 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 definitely was something that I noticed, but I couldn't quite understand or pinpoint like why that was. And I was just like, you start
Yeah.
getting fatigued sometimes, um, going to support the local stories that are being put out there, and it's just
Hmm.
like, man, it's
Hmm.
I feel so sad all the time, or I feel so
Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, my daughter goes to a lot of movies. She's in LA, so she has a lot of movies to go to. But she goes to a lot of these movies, and sometimes she comes home like that. Yeah, it's like, wow,
yeah,
I, I need to watch something funny now because I'm,
yeah,
I'm really I'm really feeling down right at this moment
yeah,
because of that movie. But a lot of the newer movies are, I think, tending to be that way. The same thing, they
yeah.
tend to
That's
be on the
true.
heavy side.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of funny light stuff. That's I think why Barbie did so well. Maybe because
Hmm.
it's kind of fun lights. I mean, it has its heavy moments, but there's some
Yeah.
fun light stuff in there. And I think that maybe that again we're locked into the culture of the times we're in,
Hmm.
and that seems to be where people are right now in terms of dealing with problems in the world, and so it's a heavier time than it was back in the 50s and 60s, where
Yeah.
maybe we didn't have. I mean, I'm sure we still had the same issues, but maybe not as much in the forefront as it is
Hmm.
now. That we have to deal with. So
Yeah. I promised you I'd get you out of here in time, and I'm
okay,
running close to that. But I wanted to ask you one last thing before we
sure.
we end our talk. Is um, for a person like yourself who's had so many experiences and has um, I know you say that you're limited to the options that you're given, but I also feel that you've specifically chosen to work with a lot of the different projects that you have with intention, and
Mm-hmm.
it just seems that you seem to have a real passion for um, supporting, whether it's in acting or in other ways, these local stories, these things that are specific to Hawaii versus, these big mainland stories or programs that come through. It's like it doesn't seem that I see you in those as much, and I feel like it's on purpose. Why has it been a calling for you or important to you, or what is it that inspires you to really want to provide some kind of support and continue to keep these local stories going
Mm-hmm.
in the local art scene.
I've been actively involved with Kumukahua Theater, and
Yeah,
the mission of Kumukahua Theater is to do that exactly, to tell
right.
um, stories of Hawaii,
Hmm.
and of course lately even our list of shows have become a little bit heavier than they were before. The earlier years that I was involved, we had a lot more light and airy type of shows.
Hmm.
Where we're at now in terms of point in time is that we have the next generation, or two actually, or maybe even three. I'm Sansei and Yonsei, so third generation, fourth generation, depending on whether you look at my mom's side or my dad's side.
Hmm.
And most of the kids now are like sixth, seventh, eighth generation in terms of Hawaii. I think that they're losing track of the stories of what it was like growing up in Hawaii in the 40s and 50s. The plantation days, the statehood days, how things have evolved and changed over time. And even going farther back than that. the internment camp days for the Japanese, that kind of stuff. I think a lot of the younger generation folks either don't know those
Mm-hmm.
stories or just choose not to learn those things. And so I think the mission, not necessarily just Kumu, but the mission of storytellers and people like myself who came through those periods of time, that our obligation, that word pops up again, is to make sure that the younger generation know what happened back then and learn from that and say this is how your grandpa and grandma and your great grandpa and great grandma, this is their life, this is what they had to go through to get to where you are now. Yeah, so you need to learn that in order to appreciate what you have now,
Right.
where you are now, based on what happened before. All the sacrifices that they made, all the things that they had to go through, um, to give you the life that you currently have. And I think that's the obligation we have in terms of telling the stories of why. And there's still a ton of stories out there that we don't know, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Unserved populations, the Micronesian groups. Uh, I think we're slowly starting to pull their stories out. And some of the newer groups that came to Hawaii, the Vietnamese, they have stories to tell. Um, but nobody, no, I shouldn't say nobody, but there's very few people who actually sat down and wrote those stories.
Yeah.
And so we need to have writers, first of all, who can write those stories, and we need to be able to perform those stories to tell the current generation of folks, this is what happened, this is how we came to be here.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just pop, and we're here, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, things happened. And so there's a ton of stories, I think, that's still out there that haven't been told, that we need to tell. And so that's the challenge, and I think, and that's why I continue to do what I'm doing. um, we did a show just this past summer called The Era of Change. There's a department at the University of Hawaii called the Oral History Department. And what their job is and was is to collect oral histories of people, and put them down on paper and bind them in books. Well, the guy who was the head of the Oral Histories Department at the time, this was a few years back, said, wow, what a waste. We got these wonderful stories that we're capturing from these people that we're interviewing. And all we're doing is binding them into a book and we're putting them on the reference shelf at Hamilton Library at UH. And nobody looks at it. Nobody reads it.
Yeah.
It's just lost. And so his vision was we need to take some of those stories and we need to put it out there. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what we did. There's this other department at UH called the Outreach College, and so they send performers out into the community, libraries, senior centers, wherever people want to see these things. And so they got together and they pulled out some of the interesting stories, and they got actors and storytellers, like myself, and we actually did the oral history. I became this
Wow.
particular character, and I said his words. I told his story in this show that we put together. And that's the kind of stuff that I think we still need to continue doing,
Yeah.
because there are these stories that are out there and nobody knows because
Mm-hmm.
nobody's heard them and nobody's shared the stories. And so we need to continue to share those stories. We need to continue doing that. So are they all light and airy? No, they're not. Some of them are pretty dark and scary, but we need to still tell all those stories, the light and airy and the not so nice stories, and continue to do so. So that's kind of where I'm coming from right now. I will continue to do what I'm doing because I enjoy doing what I'm doing, and it still has a lot of stories and a lot of things that people don't know that we need to keep sharing. Um, where we're lacking right now is the writing. I think
Yeah.
we don't have as many people writing these stories down as we had in the past. So it's one part of Kumu's mission is that we're starting to try to put together a group of writers who can do that. We can try to develop the
Yeah.
writing uh, skills in terms of putting together all these stories so that we can have productions that we can do. not necessarily just at Kumukuhua Theater, but anywhere. There's a bunch of storytellers that I work with, and we're doing the same thing. You know, we try to get together every once in a while, and okay, we need a new show. We need to put together a new show. So what can we do? You know, what would be an interesting subject, and what stories can we tell that would go along with that theme? Yeah, and so
Hmm.
we try to do that as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not over yet.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. And
Yeah.
for a moment in time, you know, people are starting to wonder, are the arts going to die because there's not, enough support? But it's great to know that there are people like yourself out there in the community that are giving of your energy and your experiences and time to make sure that doesn't happen. But and also with this purpose of making our communities better with understanding of where they come from. So um, I promise I get you out of here, so I will.
Okay.
But Dan, this has been awesome. You are one of the pillars in our community, as what we should be like as performers
uh,
and as people. And I'm just so glad I got to kind of talk story with
oh,
you
thank
and
you. Thank
get
you.
into your
Appreciate
brain
that.
there.
Yeah. That's a fake me, by the way.
Oh,